Okay, welcome back, everybody. Well, let's take a look at the exercise, and then I'll tackle this sizable question we have here. So for this exercise, you'll be opening up an existing workspace. I just want to make sure that there's nothing out of the ordinary with this. Actually, no, wait, that's a complete workspace. We're going to be creating the workspace. That's what I wanted to point out. Just recently, in FME 2024.2, the generate button was removed from the button bar here. However, it does still exist under file. I know people noticed this yesterday, but just in case you missed yesterday's class, if you go to generate a workspace, it's still the same keyboard shortcut, Control G, or you can go up to the file menu and then generate your workspace. When you are generating your workspace, make sure you turn on the dynamic schema. If you forget to do that, that's perfectly okay. You can always basically create it, or you can edit it into a dynamic translation by setting a feature type merge and turning on dynamic on the output. Trying to think if there's anything out of the ordinary here. You'll be adding a resource reader, adjusting the dynamic parameters, deleting an attribute, and adding an attribute. So overall, the exercise will just be reviewing everything which I just demonstrated in the previous lessons. Now for this question here, if you have to process thousands of files, which in theory should keep the same schema, but are prepared by various people manually and don't keep a schema. So replacing the order of columns, when you are reading things in, the column order should be defined by whatever dataset you're using as the schema definition on the output. So changing the order of columns, that is definitely a good thing to use with dynamic translations, but you would want to make sure that your output is not reading the schema from the source dataset. You'd want to read the column orders from another dataset. Ultimately, what we look at next, which is getting the schema from an external table, that would be what you would want to look at for that. Moved columns, that's the same sort of thing. Empty columns, we actually look at empty columns in the next course using the schema scanner transformer. So that would be actually an excellent thing for the schema scanner to tackle. Different attribute types for the same column. When you're reading things in, if you are using a schema document of some sort, another data set or table, or even the schema scanner, to deal with the attribute types, then that'll handle the attribute types. It doesn't really matter if there's a mismatch between what your source has and what the output has, because during a translation, for the most part, FME doesn't care about your attribute types. Everything, I believe, is just FME blob or something like that. And then when we're writing, we cast that to the correct specified, defined attribute type. Twisted column names. Not entirely sure what that means. I'm assuming slight variations in the name. That I'd have to think more about. Mistyped. Okay. Yes, if you have things like that, trying to think here. If you know what they're going to be, that might be something where you have to go through, there's a transformer called the schema mapper that might be best for handling that. Basically, it has a lookup table. This attribute name becomes this attribute name. You would have to be able to list all the possible mistyping of it, but that does allow you to deal with things like where you have X, Y, latitude, longitude, eastings, northings, and various uppercase and lowercase and abbreviations of all of the above. And then using the schema mapper, you should be able to basically map all those into what you want for the output. So the schema mapper transformer would probably be your best bet for twisted column names. New column names. If they are bringing in something new, You could probably go through a schema scanner and then check for that. That wouldn't be something that could be easily handled on the output, although the schema scanner might be the direction to go with that. For the most part, that would be flagging that this sort of thing has happened. Hey, this particular workspace has additional attributes which are defined but don't match anything on the output. And an XML with unexpected tags. Detected unexpected missing replace columns and ring a bell on a particular file while ignoring additional comments made by people aside. The tags, I'm not experienced enough with XML to know, or sorry, oh, wait, an XML with unexpected tags. That would mean that there's some, again, attribute which is being defined. A dynamic translation should be able to bring that in, depending on how it's defined. XML can be a little tricky because it is object-oriented, and FME, when it's actually bringing the data in, is relational. So things end up getting flattened. That should be spotted by an XML reader, maybe, depending on how it's configured. You may have to do other things in order to spot those. If the schema document will resolve diverse column types, how does it know to match? The column type, meaning the attribute type. The attribute type is simply defined on the output. It's not trying to match up the attribute types. The attribute names, those all have to match. But if you have mismatch attribute types on your source and destination, again, FME doesn't really care. It's going to try to cast it into the appropriate one. Now, keep in mind that if you have an output defined as a number and what comes in is alphanumeric, depending on the format, you could end up with a warning or a failure. Again, it depends on the format. If you're writing out to, say, a CSV file and you've defined it as a particular attribute type, it tends not to actually care. Okay, so I'm going to turn you guys loose on the exercise here. It's also time for a short break. So please do grab the name here. The exercise. And we'll continue at, let's see, we'll continue at 10:13. Okay, good luck, everybody. Remember, if you run into any problems, please use the call for assistance in the lab.